Never a dull moment here on Blogs on Balls as we wrestle with the mixer and technology. Emma, can you hear us now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh,
Hey.
that is brilliant. I mean, I'd be so happy to hear your voice as you are right now.
Such a battle between man and machine going on in front of us.
Sure, it's harder than it looks, all right.
I agree.
We just had our full complement of producers coming in here because, Emma, you are a prize guest.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I don't sound so surprised. I know you've done bigger things. You've been on Carte Blanche quite a few occasions talking about social media law. This is something that you're indeed an expert about, according to your profile that I find on the internet.
Well, my grandfather used to say, if you don't blow your own horn, darling, who will?
Yeah, spot on.
A self-professed expert. But no, I do find this absolutely fascinating. And the truth is, I got into the field because there was just a dearth of any other kind of expertise. I had the background with my sort of media law experience, and it was a sort of a seamless transition into the social media law space.
Brilliant. And as it grows, and I think as Twitter becomes this more sort of, it's almost like sport is nothing without Twitter nowadays, because as soon as an announcement happens, it generally gets broken first on Twitter. And, you have sports stars making a complete arse of themselves on Twitter as well, if you just look at the English cricket team. But now...
It's funny that you use the example of the English cricket team. The manager of the English cricket team said a few years ago, giving Twitter to cricketers is like giving machine guns to monkeys. But, it has changed remarkably, because if you think a few years ago, they could really prime what was going to be said at press conferences. Don't put them on if they were particularly angry or upset about a decision. Make sure they've gone through the script and sort of stick to the party line when they went into the press conference. Now, they really sort of have unabated instant access to this international public platform. And particularly the sort of tweeting in anger, tweeting in haste kind of issues seem to be popping up time and again.
Well, completely. And if you're going to use the reference of machine guns to monkeys, English cricketers, those drunk Aussie rugby players, well, that's like an atomic bomb to an angry, drunk North Korean dictator. You see it popping up all the time. And it's great that leads to so many conversations, but there's always a sort of line where... if you cross it, you're now in a space you don't need to be. Now, we're talking Twitter parody accounts today because we're talking to a guy who, in my mind, had the most successful Twitter parody account in the whole world, in the world of Twitter. It was the Richie Benno account. Of course, Richie is about 175. He probably doesn't know what Twitter is, let alone how to use a smartphone. So it was quite obvious from the start.
Very well. I don't know if you saw that he had a car accident a couple of days
he's
ago. Still recovering.
A little bit under the weather at the moment. He had a bit of a run-in with something.
Run in with a wall. He was on his way home from playing golf, and he crashed his rather fine car into a wall.
Yeah.
He's broken his sternum, and he's in the hospital.
Oh, gosh. No,
Hope he recovers in time for the test.
I didn't really want to read about that story because, if anything, it hurts when I hear Richie's hurt. But it was quite obvious from the outset that account was a fake, because there's no way Richie would be that savvy or just be that persistent. However, he was quoted in mainstream newspaper press in England about his views on the Ashes or something like that.
Yeah.
But now, when does it get a point where it becomes a legal issue, where there's a person... Okay, now this person didn't say fake Richie or whatever. It was at Richie _ was the name of the thing. Does that person have a legal responsibility while tweeting under the pseudonym like this?
Yeah, so Twitter's guidelines are very clear on this. They allow parody accounts, but it must be very, very clear that that is indeed a parody account, both in the bio, in the name, and in the avatar. So the username, it needs to be very clear in all of those three things that it's a parody account. Now, you can choose your language, you can be fairly creative. They give guidelines such as saying, not the real whatever, or fake, or fan, or... So they do give those kind of guidelines, although they do say that you can be creative, provided it's absolutely clear in the mind of the reader on Twitter that that is not the real account. And as soon as you have an impersonation account, where that line becomes blurred, so where you portray it to be, where you pretend to be another person, and that leads to either confusion or deception in the mind of the reader, then that's where the guidelines kick in. And Twitter is quite quick actually to close impersonation accounts. They did so recently in the South African context with Chief Justice Mogoeng, where three impersonation accounts popped up. They were clearly impersonation accounts and not parody accounts, because it wasn't clear that they were fake. So that's the Facebook, the Twitter stance. They usually do give users the opportunity to amend their Twitter bio and avatar and name and a Twitter handle before they close them down. So basically they say, we've had this complaint, it's an impersonation account, either fix it or we'll close it. And then it's quite easy to bring those accounts within the Twitter guidelines. So we saw it recently with Pippa Middleton. Now, there was a spoof account which popped up called Pippa Tips, and it was really quite funny. She instituted legal action, sent a lawyer's letter to the people behind the account, and there were various spin-offs of the account. There was a website called Pippa's Tips. There was a book that was being sold on Amazon, and all they did was just quickly make it very clear that it was a fake account, from sort of having blurred the lines to making it very clear. At the moment it says, and I see it's still up, I had a look at it this morning, it's called Not Pippa Middleton, and then it says in the bio, clearly a parody. This Twitter account is not endorsed by Pippa Middleton or authorized by Pippa Middleton, and it's definitely not written by Pippa Middleton. Now that account is much, much more popular than Pippa Middleton's real account. So that would be if somebody came to me and they were the creator of a sort of an impersonation /Twitter /parody account. I would merely make sure that account was amended to fall within the parody guidelines.
So it is a really clear-cut thing. It's not like suddenly you build a following of a few tens of thousands of people and then suddenly you hit with a big lawsuit. So you are actually essentially guided towards going towards the ethical way. But now, what if somebody who does have a big account, again, I'm not really focusing on anybody in particular here, what if they're looking to make money, say, in a book, comedy CDs or something like that, based upon the fact that they've used someone's identity to gain this popularity? Again, is it the thing if you declare straight up that this is merely a parody, are you fine?
Exactly. I think that as long as, we can't deny that there is some great humor in these satirical, sometimes sardonic, often silly parody accounts. And they really are just a wonderful segment of content, I think, on Twitter. Certainly some of my favorite accounts that I follow are Twitter parody accounts. I'm thinking immediately of the Queen, which was one of the first accounts that I started following.
She was great during the Olympics.
Extraordinarily popular. Yeah, I mean, she really was fabulous. Extraordinarily popular. So I think that the trick is just making sure that everybody knows up front that you're a parody. And I don't think that makes it lose any kind of gravitas, because I think that people are now aware of how valuable these parody accounts can be. So so really just staying away from any kind of impersonation, deception, any kind of blurring of the lines. So as soon as readers are aware that this isn't the real person that they're hearing from, then you're sort of scot-free, and you can really get away with quite a lot. Very robust content they allow.
Great, well, that's exactly what I want to chat to you about today, just to make it, because I've heard various stories about Twitter accounts being closed, and sort of seedy underdealings of these things happening. So it is as simple as that. If you want to basically, say for instance, somebody wants to make a parody account of you, as long as they're saying this is a parody account and they use a flattering photo in the profile picture, then
please.
then essentially it's game on, and it is kind of flattering as opposed to the person who's being parodied. Imitations of most sincere form of flattery, if there's a saying like that. Yeah, Sean?
Was it Oscar Wilde? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
Well, exactly. I know. We hate the fact people don't talk about our show. They will now.
Yeah, so provided it said, if they wanted to call it Media Law Barbie or something, provided it said not the real Emma Sadleir in the byline, in the bio, then it would be absolutely fine. I'd have very, very little course of action.
Great. Well, Emma, it's not even a debate about certain things. You've just made it perfectly clear for us, which is a great start to our little segment here on Twitter Parodies. Thanks so much for your time. If you want to see,
it's an absolute pleasure.
You want to hear more of Emma or engage with her on more robust debate, at Emma Sadleir, EMMA SADLIER. She's on Twitter.
EIR.
It's
I before E, except after C, except in weird, feisty, and Sadleir.
There are more English rules that break that law than obey it.
I know, right?
Just thought I'd throw that one in.
Yeah, I did quite badly there. So sorry, EIR, sadly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she's got a website where you use her name and just add a .com at the end there. Emma, thanks so much for your time. This has been very interesting. And not that, if you want to go make a parody account, go right ahead, I think is the moral of this, which leads us into our man from Australia, which we're going to bring.